The rain hammered against the enormous glass windows of Alexander Pierce's penthouse, each drop like a tiny drumbeat echoing the turmoil inside him. He sat in his wheelchair staring blankly at the city lights stretching far below. But the truth was, he didn't belong there. Not in this fabricated tragedy he had created. Alexander, the young billionaire with a Midas touch in business, had built an empire from scratch. But he had never built trust. And tonight, trust, or the lack of it, was the very thing that consumed him. It had all started a month ago when Alexander met Evelyn Hart at a charity gala. She was elegant, beautiful, and seemingly perfect. Intelligent, charming, and effortlessly graceful. In the whirlwind of champagne toasts and stolen glances, he found himself drawn to her like a moth to a flame. Yet behind his fascination lurked a gnawing suspicion. Evelyn had moved in with him after only a few weeks, and Alexander's mind refused to rest. Could someone truly love him for himself? Or was it the wealth that held them near? Driven by a toxic mix of fear and pride, Alexander hatched a plan he would soon regret. He told Evelyn he had suffered a severe accident and was now paralyzed from the waist down. Overnight, his life transformed into a carefully staged lie. Wheelchair-bound, vulnerable, dependent on others for every small task, Alexander watched her reaction closely. Each word, each gesture a test of her sincerity. Evelyn, however, didn't flinch. She expressed concern, tenderness, even patience, but she also struggled. Alexander saw her frustration, and it fed the bitterness in his heart. Every sigh she let slip, every frustrated glance, he catalogued as proof that love was always conditional, transactional. He had set a trap to measure her loyalty, and in his own twisted logic, he waited to catch her failing. It was during these days of orchestrated misery that he noticed her. The maid, Clara? She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Small, unassuming, and always moving quietly through the penthouse like a shadow of warmth. Clara had been with him for 2 years, tending to his home, his meals, his life, without ever stepping into his world with demands or expectations. Where Evelyn's love was performative, Clara's care was invisible but steadfast. Clara's days began early. She would quietly prepare breakfast, adjust the cushions on his chair, even slip a small note with words of encouragement when she thought no one was watching. At first, Alexander didn't notice. He was too focused on Evelyn, too ensnared in his cruel little experiment. But slowly, in the still moments of solitude, he began to see her. How she moved with grace. How she seemed genuinely happy not for what she could gain, but for what she could give. One evening, after Evelyn had stormed out in frustration over his supposed limitations, Alexander found himself alone in the dimly lit living room. Clara was there, wiping the corners of the antique bookshelf. "Mr. Pierce, would you like some tea?" she asked softly. Her voice had a calm rhythm, a steadiness that made him almost forget the hollow pain he had manufactured for himself. "Yes. Thank you," he murmured, and she poured the steaming liquid with care. She didn't ask why he was silent, didn't demand answers. She simply sat beside him, a quiet presence that was strangely comforting. Days turned into weeks, and Alexander's charade continued. Evelyn's patience waned, and her visits became shorter. The more she withdrew, the more Alexander felt his heart harden. But Clara never faltered. She became the anchor he didn't know he needed. She listened without judgment, smiled without calculation, and cared without expectation. In her presence, Alexander began to question the very walls he had built around himself. Then came the storm that would break the last of his defenses. One night, a power outage struck the penthouse. Rain poured against the windows, lightning split the sky, and the city below was swallowed in darkness. Alexander, still pretending to be paralyzed, tried to maneuver his wheelchair to the phone but struggled. Panic rose in his chest. In that moment, it wasn't the paralysis that mattered. It was fear, pure and raw. Clara appeared almost instantly. Without hesitation, she lifted him from the chair, her arms steady and sure. "It's okay, Mr. Pierce, I've got you," she said, and something in her voice, calm and unwavering, pierced through the layers of deceit he had wrapped around his heart. He looked at her, really looked at her, and realized the truth he had been too blind to see. This was love. Not the dramatic declarations, not the fragile attachments tied to wealth, but quiet, persistent, and unwavering. He didn't need to test it, didn't need to measure it. It had been here all along, in the way Clara cared for him without a single expectation. In the days that followed, Alexander faced a choice. Evelyn returned, hoping for reconciliation, her eyes pleading for answers. He could continue the lie, continue to manipulate, continue to play a game of wealth and fear. But looking at her now, he felt only emptiness. Evelyn had loved the idea of him, not the man beneath. Clara, on the other hand, had loved him in his entirety, even the parts he had tried to hide, even the weaknesses he had fabricated. Alexander ended the charade. One evening, he wheeled himself to Clara, the city lights casting long reflections across the marble floor. "Clara," he began, voice shaking, not from fear but from something far deeper. "I've been a fool. I tried to test the wrong heart, and I see now that love isn't earned through tests or trials. It's given freely." Clara's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and hope. "Mr. Pierce?" she whispered. He took a deep breath. "Clara, I love you. Not because you cared for a rich man. Not because you did what was expected. But because you saw me. All of me, even the parts I was too scared to show." Tears welled in her eyes. I love you too, Mr. Pierce," she said, her voice steady but breaking at the edges. "I always have." In that moment, Alexander understood the power of humility, the strength of quiet devotion, and the emptiness of wealth without genuine connection. He realized that life's richest treasures aren't diamonds, gold, or mansions. They are the souls that care for us when we are most unworthy of it. Months later, the penthouse was no longer a stage for deception, but a home filled with laughter and warmth. Evelyn's absence was a gentle reminder of the past, a shadow that helped him appreciate the present. Alexander and Clara built a life not on wealth or pretense, but on mutual respect, shared dreams, and the kind of love that doesn't demand testing because it knows no bounds. And sometimes, when the rain taps against the windows, Alexander smiles at Clara's soft, steady presence beside him, and he thanks the universe for the lesson he almost learned too late, that true love is quiet, steadfast, and found in the most unexpected places. By the time the city sleeps, and the lights of the skyline twinkle like distant stars, Alexander Pierce finally understands the deepest truth of all. Love isn't about proving loyalty. It's about seeing, valuing, and cherishing the heart that loves you in return. And for him, that heart has always been Clara's.